picture this, you are sitting in your living room, the lights are dimmed, the thermostat is set to like really comfortable 70 degrees. Maybe you've got a bowl of popcorn on your lap.
Oh, absolutely setting the scene.
Yeah, and you are watching a high-stakes reality show. You know the exact kind I'm talking about, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, everyone knows those shows.
Giant rogue waves crashing over the bow of this massive industrial ship, men yelling over the deafening roar of marine diesel engines.
Heavy steel machinery swinging wildly in the freezing wind.
Exactly. And, we all crave that thrill. We lean into the danger, the adrenaline, the sheer unscripted drama of human beings battling nature at its absolute worst.
But we can only enjoy it because we're safe.
Right. We can only consume it as entertainment because there is this protecting barrier of glass between us and the reality on the screen. We are entirely safe.
Right. They are in mortal danger, but it's neatly packaged.
Exactly. It's edited and scored with dramatic music for our Wednesday night viewing. So the question is, what happens when that glass barrier shatters?
That's the real question.
What happens when the lethal, unforgiving reality of the environment completely supersedes the entertainment value? When those unscripted stakes become, a literal matter of life and death?
It forces a massive cultural and psychological reckoning, really.
Yeah, how so?
Well, it violently strips away the cinematic editing. It takes away the carefully constructed character arcs and the soaring background music.
Right, you're left with just the raw footage.
Exactly, leaving us staring at a raw occupation that is, by its very physical nature, fundamentally hostile to human survival. It transforms a television show back into a workplace.
A really dangerous workplace.
I mean, in this specific instance, it reminds us that this is one of the most profoundly dangerous workplaces on the planet.
And that reckoning is the core of what we are unpacking today. We are focusing on the devastating death of 25-year-old Todd Meadows. Todd was a deckhand on the commercial fishing vessel, the Aleutian Lady. And he was also a first-year cast member of the Discovery Channel's long-running series, Deadliest Catch.
A rookie on the show.
Yeah, and on the afternoon of February 25, 2026, he died after falling overboard into the Bering Sea. So, our mission for this deep dive is to unpack the extreme physical and mechanical risks of Bering Sea crabbing.
It's a vital mission.
We want to tear down that glass barrier and contrast the unvarnished reality of that environment with the way it's portrayed on television.
And we also need to analyze the fallout.
Yeah.
We'll be looking at the profound psychological and economic impact this loss has had on the tight-knit commercial fishing community.
Which is huge.
It really is. And we'll be examining the specific, highly debated safety innovations that might finally evolve in the wake of this highly publicized tragedy.
And just to give you an overview of our sources, we are drawing from Coast Guard casualty reports, forensic medical analyses, direct statements from the crew, and the complex legal battles that are currently brewing.
There's a lot of material to go through.
Yeah, there is. Okay, let's unpack this by anchoring ourselves in the physical reality of that day. Because, to understand the broader implications for the entertainment industry and maritime law, we have to understand the exact mechanics of what happened on the deck of the Aleutian Lady.
Right.
So set the scene for us. Where exactly are they and what are the conditions?
Okay, so it is late afternoon, February 25, 2026. The Aleutian Lady is operating roughly 170 miles north of Dutch Harbor, Alaska.
Wow, okay. 170 miles.
Yeah, and to put that isolation into perspective, Dutch Harbor is situated on Amoknak Island in the Aleutian chain.
Right, it's sort of the main hub out there.
Exactly. It is the primary logistical hub, the last outpost of major civilization and maritime support for the Bering Sea crab fleet.
So when you say 170 miles north of that...
You are entirely off the grid. You are operating in deep, isolated, unforgiving waters where the weather systems are basically dictated by the collision of cold Arctic air and the warmer currents of the Pacific.
Which creates just absolute monster storms. And the weather reports from that specific afternoon are brutal. I mean, air temperatures are hovering around -10 degrees Celsius.
Right.
And for those of us used to Fahrenheit, that's 14 degrees, but that's just the ambient air, right?
Oh, yeah, you have to factor in the wind chill.
Right. The wind chill from gale force winds across an open ocean, which brings the felt temperature down to something closer to -30.
It's unimaginably cold.
And the water itself is near freezing, right around 0 degrees Celsius. Plus, it's not a calm surface. You have massive swells and constant sea spray.
The sea spray is actually one of the most dangerous parts.
I was reading up on how freezing spray works in the sources, and It's terrifying. The wind whips the tops off the waves, throwing salt water across the deck.
Right.
And because the steel of the boat is super cooled by the air, that water freezes on contact.
It does. The ice accumulation completely alters the physics of the environment.
Hmm.
I mean, the deck becomes a literal skating rink.
Which is crazy when you think about the machinery they're using.
Exactly. The crew constantly has to use sledgehammers and baseball bats to shatter the ice off the railings and the crab pots.
Just to be able to move around.
Not just so they can work, but because if too much ice builds up high in the ship's superstructure, it changes the vessel's center of gravity.
Wait, really? Like, the ice is that heavy?
Oh, yeah. The entire boat can capsize from the weight of the ice alone. That is the baseline reality of the workspace, where Todd Meadows was standing at 5 p.m. local time.
Unbelievable. And he's working at a sorting table, right? So describe the mechanics of that specific job, because he's not just standing around.
No, not at all.
He is engaged in heavy, repetitive, incredibly fast-paced manual labor.
Yeah, the sorting table is exactly what it sounds like, but it's situated right at the vessel's rail, often waist high.
So right on the edge of the boat.
Right on the edge. And when an 800-pound steel cragcod is hauled up from the bottom of the ocean and dumped onto the deck, the crew has to manually sort the catch.
Right, because of the regulations.
Yeah, state and federal regulations are incredibly strict to protect the crab populations.
Yeah.
You can only keep male crabs of a certain size.
Okay.
Any females and any undersized males, which the crew calls shorts, must be immediately thrown back into the ocean alive.
So they are standing directly at the edge of the ship, leaning over this table, rapidly grabbing massive aggressive crabs, measuring them by eye or with a physical gauge, and tossing the illegal ones over the side.
It's a blur of motion.
It sounds like it.
It is exhausting, repetitive motion in heavy rubber gear on a slick, pitched deck. And it was during this rapid-fire sorting process, right around 5 p.m., that Todd Meadows lost his footing or his balance and fell over the rail into the Bering Sea.
God, it's awful. And the timeline from the second he breaks the surface of the water is critical here.
It really is.
At 5:05 p.m., so exactly 5 minutes after he goes into the water, the U.S. Coast Guard Arctic District Command Center in Juneau receives the official notification of a man overboard situation. The crew executes an MOB protocol, and they manage to physically recover him from the water in approximately 10 minutes.
Which is incredibly fast for an MOB.
Right. But they pull him back over the rail, and he is totally unresponsive.
Yeah.
The crew immediately begins emergency first aid. They perform CPR for a prolonged, agonizing period on the deck and in the galley, but it is ultimately unsuccessful.
It was devastating.
Todd Meadows is declared dead, and the Aleutian Lady immediately ceases all commercial fishing operations. They turn the bow south and begin the grueling multi-hour transit back to Dutch Harbor, carrying the body of their crewmate.
Yeah.
I really want to focus on that 10-minute window, though, because to an average person listening to this right now, a 10-minute emergency response time sounds incredible.
It does sound fast.
I mean, think about it. If you are sitting in your house in a major suburb and you suffer a massive heart attack, you call emergency services. If an ambulance arrives, the paramedics assess you and they have you stabilized on a stretcher in 10 minutes, that is considered a gold standard, near miraculous response time by modern urban healthcare standards.
Oh, absolutely.
So mathematically, how is it that an incredibly fast 10-minute rescue by this highly trained crew is fundamentally too late?
Well, it comes down to the difference between a neutral environment and a hostile one.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
A 10-minute response on land means paramedics are treating a patient whose surrounding environment, like the living room or the sidewalk,
Right.
isn't actively trying to kill them.
Right. The room isn't the problem.
Exactly. In the Bering Sea, the environment is the primary weapon. To understand why a 10-minute recovery is an eternity, we have to look at the immense physical and mechanical hurdles the crew has to overcome just to turn the boat around.
Right.
This isn't, a speedboat on a calm lake.
No, I was digging into the mechanics of a live deck in our sources. It's basically an industrial factory floor that is violently pitching back and forth.
A live deck is organized chaos. When Todd goes over, someone screams. The captain, up in the wheelhouse, hears the alarm.
But he can't just stop.
No. His first instinct cannot simply be to slam the engines into reverse. He has hydraulic cranes swinging 800-pound steel pots in the air.
Oh, wow.
He has thick, heavy lines coiled on the deck that are attached to those pots. If he just throws the rudder over and guns the engine, Those pots turn into wrecking balls that will crush the remaining crew.
Or I guess those lines will snap taut and drag 3 more men into the ocean.
Exactly. The captain has to safely halt the hydraulic operations first.
The crew has to secure the swinging gear,
Yeah, they have to ensure the deck is safe enough to even attempt a rescue maneuver.
which eats up precious seconds.
Absolutely. And then comes the physics of the vessel itself. These crab boats are often over 100 feet long. They weigh hundreds of tons.
Right.
Turning a vessel of that mass in 10 to 15-foot swells is incredibly dangerous. You turn broadside to a massive waves, the boat can roll.
So they can't just spin around.
No, the captain has to execute a specific maritime maneuver, like a Williamson turn, to safely bring the vessel back around to the exact GPS coordinates where the man fell.
All while fighting currents and winds that are rapidly pushing the victim away from that drop point.
Exactly.
And meanwhile, the crew is scrambling to ready a life ring or drop a scramble net down the side of the hull. And then they actually have to spot a human head bobbing in a chaotic sea of whitecaps and freezing foam in the fading afternoon light.
It's like finding a needle in a haystack.
When you lay out the sheer physics of it, the fact that they got him back on deck in 10 minutes is a testament to incredible seamanship.
It is a superhuman feat of maritime skill, honestly. But you touched on the crucial factor earlier. Why not call for a helicopter?
Right.
Being 170 miles north of Dutch Harbor means the Coast Guard is effectively removed from the immediate rescue equation.
I mean, a Jayhawk helicopter takes time to fuel. It takes time for the pilots to run their pre-flight checks. Then they have to fly 170 miles through what could be blinding snow squalls, arrive on scene, hover over a pitching mast, and lower a rescue swimmer. That process takes hours.
Hours that they don't have.
Right.
Therefore, the absolute entirety of the burden of survival rests on two things: the crew's ability to turn that massive steel ship around, and the victim's own internal physiological limits.
Because there's nobody else coming.
There is no external cavalry coming. And in near-freezing water, the human body's physiological limits expire violently and rapidly.
Which means we really need to pivot from the mechanics of the ship to the biology of the human body. Because to truly understand why 10 minutes was a death sentence, we have to peel back the forensic realities of subarctic immersion.
Right. Let's look at the medical side. The official forensic findings on the death certificate listed the cause as drowning with probable hypothermia and submersion of body in cold water.
I really want to dissect this because I think popular culture has deeply misinformed us about what happens in freezing water. When you watch a movie like, Titanic, the portrayal of freezing to death is this slow, tragic fade to black. We think of hypothermia as a gradual decline.
That's the Hollywood version. Yeah.
You fall in, you shiver violently, your teeth chatter, you eventually get incredibly lethargic and sleepy as your core temperature drops over the course of 20 or 30 minutes, and then your heart stops.
Right.
But looking at the medical breakdown of this incident and the source, so it's not actually the slow process of freezing to death that is the primary threat?
No, not at all.
The body essentially sabotages itself the second it hits the water.
What's fascinating here is that it is a brutal betrayal by your own nervous system.
Wow.
Long-term hypothermia, that slow drop in core temperature you just described, is rarely what actually kills a person first in the Bering Sea.
Really?
Yeah, the initial, highly lethal mechanism is a physiological phenomenon known as the cold shock response.
Okay, break down the mechanics of the cold shock response for us. What exactly is the nervous system doing when a human body impacts water that is 0 degrees Celsius?
So when the skin suddenly impacts water below 15 degrees Celsius, and remember, this water was 0 degrees.
Right, literally freezing.
The massive network of cold receptors in the skin fires a simultaneous, overwhelming panic signal directly to the brain.
Like an alarm bell.
Exactly. It triggers an involuntary, uncontrollable reflex governed by the autonomic nervous system.
Okay.
In the first 30 to 90 seconds of immersion, the body forcefully and involuntarily gasps for air.
Think about the last time you took a shower and somebody flushed a toilet elsewhere in the house and the water suddenly went ice cold.
Yes, that exact feeling.
You involuntarily suck in a breath. Your chest heaves. Now multiply that reflex by 1,000.
That is the exact mechanism. Now, place that massive involuntary gasp in the context of the Bering Sea.
Okay.
If you take that massive breath while your head happens to be underwater, perhaps because you are disoriented from the fall, or your heavy boots are dragging you down, or if you take that gasp right as a 10-foot wave crashes over your face, you instantly aspirate a massive volume of seawater directly into your lungs.
And it doesn't take gallons of water to drown. I mean, it takes a fraction of a cup in the lungs to trigger a catastrophic failure.
Right. Furthermore, even if the water doesn't flood the lungs entirely, the sudden influx of freezing salt water against the vocal cords can trigger laryngospasm.
What does that mean exactly?
This is where the vocal cords violently spasm and clamp shut in a misguided attempt to protect the airway from the water.
So it's trying to help, but it hurts.
It effectively seals the windpipe. The victim suffocates, completely unable to draw breath, even if their head breaks the surface.
That's terrifying.
It is. This massive hyperventilation and panic lead to rapid drowning within the first 1 to 3 minutes, long before the core body temperature has dropped a single degree.
It completely shatters the Hollywood illusion. I mean, in movies, the hero falls into the icy river and they furiously tread water, yelling for someone to throw them a rope, looking perfectly coordinated.
Right. But the thermal dynamics of water make that impossible.
Because water conducts heat away from the human body 25 times faster than air.
The thermodynamic drain is unimaginable. If a victim somehow manages to keep their head above water and survives that initial 90 seconds of the gasp reflex without drowning,
Which is a big if.
a huge if,
Yeah.
but if they do, they immediately enter the second phase, cold incapacitation.
Okay.
Because the water is violently pulling heat away, the body goes into extreme, desperate survival mode. The brain recognizes that the core organs, the heart, the lungs, the liver, are under threat.
So what does it do?
It initiates profound peripheral vasoconstriction.
Meaning it aggressively clamps down all the blood vessels in the arms and legs. It sacrifices the limbs to save the chest.
Precisely. The blood is routed away from the extremities. Deprived of warm, oxygenated blood, the muscles and nerves in the arms and legs simply cease to function.
They just stop working.
They become rigid, stiff, and utterly useless.
To bring this back to something we've all felt, think about trying to unlock your front door in the dead of winter when you forgot your gloves.
Right, a great analogy.
Your fingers get so cold they become clumsy, thick, and unresponsive. You drop your keys because the fine motor skills are gone.
Exactly.
Now imagine that complete loss of control spreading from your fingers, up your arms, into your shoulders, and down your legs, all within 2 or 3 minutes.
Within minutes, even an Olympic-level swimmer will lose the gross motor function required to paddle or tread water.
So even if help is right there,
Even if a crewmate throws a life ring directly to them, right on target, their hands will not be able to grip the plastic.
wow.
Their arms will not be able to lift over the ring. They lose all buoyancy control and slip silently beneath the surface.
This is why the forensic report listed probable hypothermia.
Right. Todd was in the water for 10 minutes. It is highly probable that the initial cold shock reflex and rapid drowning claimed his life in the first 2 minutes.
But the extreme thermal stress ensured he suffered total cold incapacitation.
Exactly. Rendering him entirely unable to assist in his own rescue or grab a line if one was thrown to him in those final moments.
It is a devastating, inescapable physiological sequence. And, understanding the sheer terror and lethality of those 10 minutes brings us to a really complicated intersection in this deep dive.
It does.
Because Todd Meadows wasn't just an anonymous fisherman doing a dangerous job in the dark.
No, he wasn't.
His death occurred in the middle of the day while season 22 of Deadliest Catch was in active production. He was a cast member.
Right.
And that introduces a massive layer of complexity regarding the tension between reality television, occupational hazards, and real-world tragedy.
It creates a deeply complex ethical and psychological environment, frankly.
Yeah, let's talk about the show. Deadliest Catch premiered in 2005. It has built a massive global empire precisely by showcasing this exact type of environmental danger.
The peril is the product.
Exactly. And Todd Meadows was a rookie on the show, navigating his first year on camera. And because this is a highly produced television series, the tragedy was thoroughly documented.
Thoroughly. According to the statements from his crewmates, the entire incident was captured by multiple angles.
I read there was a fixed deck camera.
Yeah, there is a fixed deck camera that rolls 24/7, providing that wide security-style shot of the sorting table. But beyond that, there was an actual producer and a camera operator who had been living on the boat, embedded with the crew for 2 months. They were right there on the deck.
And the existence of this high-definition multi-angle footage has caused an immediate, massive wave of controversy, hasn't it?
Oh, masses.
Fahad's mother, Angela Meadows, has come out publicly with a very firm, unyielding request that the Discovery Channel not air any footage of her son's final moments.
Right.
Her specific quote to the press was that she refuses to let the network, quote, make money off of our son's death.
Which is a very powerful statement.
It is impossible not to empathize with a mother's fierce desire to protect her son's final, most agonizing moments from public consumption. But this isn't the first time the network and the producers have had to navigate the death of a cast member.
No, there's a long documented history of fatalities within the franchise.
And the show's handling of those events has established a precedent. Let's look at the history here.
The history of the show provides a grim taxonomy of how men die in this industry, really.
How so?
If we analyze the fatalities, they largely fall into two distinct categories: mechanical trauma and environmental exposure.
Okay, give us an example of mechanical.
For example, in 2021, 30-year-old Todd Meadows died on the Patricia Lee. He was struck by an 800-pound crab pot.
Oh, God.
That is a mechanical death, the industrial machinery of the boat claiming a life.
Then you have the incredibly famous case of Captain Phil Harris of the Cornelia Marie, who suffered a fatal stroke on camera in 2010. While that was a medical event, the stress of the environment undoubtedly played a role. And there were others who passed away off vessel between seasons, like Justin Tennyson and Tony Lara.
Historically, the production company has handled these deaths by producing what they frame as tribute episodes.
Right, I've seen some of those.
They edit the footage, often using the harrowing audio, the frantic reactions of the crew, and the emotional aftermath to honor the fallen fishermen.
And their argument is what, exactly?
They weave the tragedy into the narrative arc of the season, arguing that omitting the death would be a disservice to the reality of the profession they are documenting.
They frame it as highlighting the ultimate sacrifice demanded by the Bering Sea.
Exactly.
I understand the documentary argument, but I keep getting stuck on the psychological impact of the cameras themselves.
It's a really important angle.
Let's look at this through the lens of basic human behavior. Think about your own job. It's like when your boss is standing directly over your shoulder while you are typing an important email.
Oh, the worst feeling.
You inevitably try to work a little bit faster to look competent, but because you are rushing under observation, you make more typos.
Right, you get nervous.
Only here, a typo isn't a misspelled word. A typo means slipping on a patch of ice, missing a handhold, and falling into the Bering Sea. Does the constant, relentless presence of a camera crew subconsciously pressure these guys?
It is a vital psychological question, and one that marine safety experts have debated for years regarding reality television.
Because it's called the observer effect, right?
Yeah. The production company's mandate is strict. Document, do not interfere. They are observers.
Yeah.
But their mere physical presence alters the workspace.
How does it alter it physically?
You are adding extra personnel, bulky camera rigs, audio equipment, and cables to a deck that is already incredibly crowded, slick, and hazardous.
Right. Space is at an absolute premium on a boat.
More significantly, it adds a dense layer of unspoken psychological pressure.
Because of the culture of the job.
Yeah, these fishermen are highly prideful. They are engaged in a hyper-masculine, physically demanding culture. When the red light on that camera is on, they are performing not just for their captain to earn their share of the catch.
They're performing for an audience of millions.
Exactly.
You want to look tough. You want to look like you can handle the pain, the cold, the exhaustion.
You don't want to show weakness.
If you are a rookie like Todd Meadows, you absolutely do not want to be the guy caught on camera complaining about the ice on the deck or asking to slow down the sorting line.
Exactly. Now, to be absolutely clear, there is currently no evidence or formal allegation that the camera crew physically caused Todd's fall or instructed him to do anything unsafe.
We have to make that distinction.
However, the tension between documenting a high-risk occupation and commodifying the inherent danger of that occupation is palpable.
It really is.
Does the presence of the camera normalize a level of risk-taking that might otherwise be questioned?
And Angela Meadows' resistance is bringing that tension to a boiling point. She is highlighting a shifting ethical boundary.
She really is.
A carefully edited tribute episode honoring a man's life is one thing, but airing the raw, terrifying reality of a young man drowning to generate ratings and ad revenue.
It's a very different thing.
The family is drawing a hard line in the sand. They are actively challenging the cultural assumption that a catastrophic workplace fatality should be converted into television content, regardless of how respectfully the network claims to package it.
It forces society to ask a very uncomfortable question.
Which is?
When does documentation cross the line into exploitation? The viewing public demands the thrill of the danger, but they rarely want to sit with the gruesome reality of the consequences.
Right, and when the season wraps, the cameras turn off.
The production crew packs up their hard drives and flies back to Los Angeles to begin editing.
But the grief doesn't leave with them.
No, it doesn't.
The true cost of this extreme profession remains entirely on the shoulders of the community.
That's the real lasting impact.
Let's talk about the men who actually have to sleep in the bunk next to Todd's empty one and the family he left behind. The human cost here is staggering.
It is.
When you read the profile of Todd Meadows in the source reports, it's heartbreaking. He was only 25 years old. He came from a small logging and fishing town, Montesano, Washington.
A real working class background.
According to his father, Lucas, Todd had been out on the water fishing since he was 3 years old.
Oh, 3?
This wasn't some guy who just answered an ad for a TV show. This was his lifelong passion, his heritage.
It is a generational calling for many of these young men. The Bering Sea crab fishery offers an incredibly rare economic opportunity.
Rare in what way?
For a young man willing to endure extreme physical suffering and risk, they can make tens of thousands of dollars in a matter of weeks or months.
That's a lot of money very quickly.
It is one of the few remaining blue-collar frontiers where sheer grit can translate into massive, immediate financial reward.
And he needed that reward because perhaps the most tragic detail in all of the reporting is that Todd was described by everyone as a determined dad.
Yeah.
He had 3 young sons, 3 little boys, who were, according to the family statements, the absolute center of his world.
It's devastating.
He was out there in the freezing spray, risking his life to provide for them.
And that amplifies the psychological trauma for the crew left behind.
Tell us about the crew dynamics.
You have to understand the deeply unique, almost claustrophobic intimacy of the bunkmate relationship on a commercial crab boat.
Because they're in such close quarters.
You are living in a steel box measuring maybe 120 feet long. You are out there for months on end.
I can't even imagine.
The smell of diesel fuel and stale sweat is permanent. The roar of the engine never stops. You work brutal 20-hour shifts together.
20 hours?
Yes, you eat rapidly in a tiny galley together, and you sleep in narrow bunks stacked inches away from each other.
So you know everything about each other. You hear about their kids, their divorces, their financial struggles.
Exactly. They become your entire universe out there on the water. Todd's bunkmate, a young man named Trey John Green III, spoke to the press about the incident.
What did he say?
And his statement was incredibly revealing about the nature of the work. He pointed out that when Todd fell, he was doing exactly what he was supposed to be doing.
I found that quote so striking when I read it. Todd wasn't goofing around for the cameras.
No?
He wasn't pulling a reckless stunt. He was simply doing his job. He was performing routine labor in an environment where the absolute baseline routine is inherently deadly.
The captain, Rick Shelford, released a statement calling it the most tragic day in the history of the Aleutian Lady.
That carries a lot of weight.
He noted that despite Todd being a rookie, the newest member of the crew, he had instantly become family.
Which speaks to that tight-knit bond you mentioned.
The psychological devastation for that crew cannot be overstated. I want you to truly imagine the horror of that sequence of events. You are standing on deck, exhausted. You hear a shout. You see your friend, the guy you just ate breakfast with, go over the rail.
The panic must be unreal.
You experience the massive adrenaline spike of the recovery maneuver. You haul his limp body over the steel rail.
And then you have to perform CPR. You are kneeling on a wet deck or the floor of the galley, physically pumping the chest of your friend.
Yes.
Breathing into his mouth, tasting the seawater, surrounded by the rest of the crew, desperately trying to force his heart to beat for an hour.
And then the captain has to make the call to stop.
God.
And the trauma doesn't end when the CPR stops.
Okay.
They couldn't just call an ambulance to take the body away and go home to process their grief.
Right, because they're 170 miles out.
They were 170 miles offshore. They had to secure Todd's body on the vessel.
Which means they have to just sit with it.
And then the surviving crew had to silently endure a 15 to 20-hour transit across the Bering Sea back to Dutch Harbor.
Just driving back in silence.
You are physically trapped in the exact location of the trauma, riding through the dark, listening to the engines, carrying the body of your friend.
It's an incredibly insular, suffocating kind of grief. But it's also an insular community that knows how to rally together because they all understand the stakes.
They do.
The response from the crabbing community, the other vessels in the fleet, and the extended fan base was immediate. A GoFundMe campaign was launched almost instantly.
The community support is always strong.
It very quickly raised over $58,500 to assist the family with funeral costs and to try and establish some semblance of a financial future for his 3 young children.
Right.
The rallying cry among his peers in the fleet became, "Do it for Todd."
It is a beautiful display of solidarity, but if we analyze the economics of that GoFundMe, it exposes a massive systemic vulnerability within the commercial fishing industry.
I was thinking the exact same thing. So what does this all mean for these workers financially?
Well, these men are performing one of the most highly specialized, dangerous jobs on the planet.
They are literally the stars of a massive, globally syndicated television franchise that generates millions in ad revenue.
Exactly. Yet economically, they are incredibly precarious.
Why is that?
They operate primarily as independent contractors. They are paid a percentage of the catch, what they call a crew share.
Okay, so it's not an hourly wage or a salary.
No, and because they are contractors, they generally lack the traditional corporate safety nets.
Like what?
They don't have human resources departments, guaranteed pensions, or robust employer-provided life insurance policies that you would assume are mandatory for a job with such a notoriously high mortality rate.
That is just wild to me. The romanticism of the lone, rugged fisherman battling the elements often obscures the harsh financial precarity of the laborer.
It does. The tight-knit community essentially has to function as its own makeshift insurance policy.
Because there's no backup plan.
They pass the hat. They start the crowdfunding campaigns. Because when the sea suddenly takes a primary provider, the financial devastation for the surviving family is absolute and immediate.
There is no corporate payout waiting to secure those 3 little boys' college funds.
No, there isn't.
And that realization, the financial devastation compounding the emotional grief, inevitably forces a transition.
Grief turns into anger.
And anger turns into a demand for accountability. How will this highly documented, highly publicized tragedy change the actual mechanisms of how commercial fishing operates?
That's what we have to look at next.
This leads us right into the legal fallout and the potential future of maritime safety regulations. Let's talk about the investigation.
The machinery of federal investigation is already grinding forward. The U.S. Coast Guard, specifically Sector Western Alaska and the U.S. Arctic, led by Captain Christopher Culpepper, has initiated a formal, exhaustive marine casualty investigation.
And what are they looking for exactly?
Their mandate is incredibly thorough. They must probe the exact mechanical, environmental, and procedural causes of the fall.
Right.
Was it a freak wave? Was it improper footwear? Was the sorting table structurally sound? And ultimately, they will mandate corrective actions for the fleet.
But the Meadows family isn't just sitting back waiting for a Coast Guard report to be published in a year, are they?
No, they aren't.
The sources indicate that the family is exploring a potential wrongful death lawsuit against the vessel owners under the Jones Act.
This is where the legal landscape gets really interesting.
I really want to dig into this because I was reading up on the Jones Act, and it blew my mind that this is a piece of legislation from 1920.
1920.
It effectively means these fishermen aren't treated like normal employees on land at all. How does an icy duck or a missing safety rail factor into a law written over a century ago?
Well, the legal framework is fascinating and entirely distinct from terrestrial law.
Okay, give us an example to compare it to.
If you work in a warehouse in Ohio and you are tragically killed by a falling pallet, your family's recourse typically falls under the state workers' compensation system.
Right, workers' comp.
Workers' comp provides a guaranteed payout, but it is heavily capped. And in exchange for that guarantee, it usually shields the employer from being sued directly for negligence.
So it's a trade-off. Guaranteed money, but you can't sue for millions if they messed up.
Precisely. However, maritime workers seamen fall under the Merchant Marine Act of 1920, universally known as the Jones Act.
And why was it written in the first place?
The history of this act traces back to the aftermath of World War I, recognizing that a strong, protected merchant marine fleet was vital for national security and commerce.
Okay.
The law historically considers seamen to be wards of the Admiralty, essentially acknowledging that they work in such isolated, inherently dangerous conditions, far from traditional legal protections, that the courts must offer them special avenues for redress.
And the most crucial avenue the Jones Act provides is that it allows a seaman, or in Todd's case, his surviving family, to bypass workers' comp and directly sue their employer for negligence.
Right, they can take them to federal court.
And in a case like this, the legal strategy will almost certainly center on a very specific maritime legal concept called unseaworthiness.
Unseaworthy.
Now, to a layperson, unseaworthiness sounds literal. It sounds like the boat had a massive hole in the hull and was sinking. But that's not what it means in a courtroom, is it?
Not at all. A vessel can be perfectly watertight, its engines can be humming perfectly, and it can still be deemed legally unseaworthy.
How does that work?
In maritime law, the vessel owner has an absolute, non-delegable duty to provide a ship, gear, and a crew that is reasonably fit for their intended purpose.
So it's broader than just floating.
It essentially means the employer must provide a safe working environment.
So the plaintiff's lawyers are going to scrutinize every single inch of that deck.
Oh, they will tear the operation apart.
Looking for what exactly?
The plaintiffs could argue unseaworthiness based on a multitude of granular factors. Were the decks inadequately cleared of ice prior to the shift starting?
Right.
Was the sorting table missing a crucial anti-slip mat? Was the railing height legally sufficient for a man of Todd's stature?
Was the crew suffering from extreme documented fatigue due to punishing operational demands pushed by the captain to hit a quota?
Exactly, all of that. And perhaps most importantly, in light of modern technology, was the vessel lacking the most up-to-date available safety gear?
Which perfectly transitions us into the massive debate happening right now regarding proposed safety innovations.
This is the crux of the future of the industry.
Because the forensic autopsy revealed the terrifying realities of the cold shock response, proving that the immediate inhalation of water is the real killer, there is a massive renewed push to mandate new gear across the entire Bering Sea fleet.
Right.
Specifically, the focus is on integrated PFDs, personal flotation devices.
Right, and we need to clarify what we mean here. We are not talking about the bulky, bright orange foam life vests you see stacked in bins on a tourist cruise ship.
No, you couldn't work in those.
You cannot sort, crab, or dodge heavy machinery wearing one of those. They are too restrictive.
So what are they proposing instead?
The push is for low-profile, inflatable PFDs that are actually engineered directly into the heavy waterproof jackets, the oil skins that the deckhands already wear.
I was looking at the engineering of these in the research, and it's brilliant. They utilize hydrostatic release valves.
Exactly. The technology is key.
Tell us how that works.
A hydrostatic release valve contains a small capsule that is designed to dissolve or activate only when it is submerged under a specific depth of water pressure, usually a few inches.
Why is that depth-specific important?
This is vital because a deckhand is constantly being hammered by rain, sea spray, and waves crashing over the rail. If the vest inflated every time it got wet, it would be useless.
It would just pop all day long, so it only pops if the man actually goes completely into the ocean.
Right. If a crew member falls in, the water pressure triggers the valve, which punctures a CO2 cartridge, instantly inflating the vest.
And it does something specific to the body, right?
The crucial, life-saving function of these integrated PFDs is their specific buoyancy design.
What does it do?
If the victim is immediately incapacitated by the cold shock gasp reflex or knocked unconscious during the fall, the inflated bladder is designed to forcefully flip the person onto their back.
And keep their head and airway elevated above the swell.
Exactly.
It mechanically prevents that lethal aspiration of seawater during the initial involuntary gasp. It buys them the 10 minutes they need for the boat to turn around.
It's a game changer. And alongside the PFDs, marine safety advocates are pushing for mandatory man overboard alarms.
MOB alarms, how do those function?
These are small, ruggedized personal radio beacons worn on the suspenders or belt of every crew member. The absolute second that beacon is submerged in conductive saltwater, it activates.
And where does the signal go?
It sends an immediate blaring electronic alarm directly to the bridge of the ship, often integrating with the vessel's AIS, the automatic identification system.
Oh, wow.
Pinpointing the exact GPS location of the fall on the captain's monitors.
So in Todd's case on the Aleutian Lady, the crew noticed him falling right away because they were working together at a table.
Right.
But in many cases on these massive, noisy vessels, a man can be working alone near the stern, slip over the side in the pitch black over the roar of the diesel engines, and his absence might not be noticed by the rest of the crew for 10 or 15 minutes.
Exactly.
By the time they realize he's gone, they are miles away. An MOB alarm eliminates that fatal delay.
It alerts the captain the instant they hit the water.
Okay, I have to jump in here and play the frustrated observer.
Go for it.
If we already have the forensic science proving that the cold shock response is the primary killer, and we already possess the engineering hydrostatic integrated PFDs and water-activated MOB alarms, that can definitively keep someone's airway clear and alert the bridge instantly.
I know where you're going with this.
Why isn't this gear already mandatory across the entire commercial fleet? Are we really just sitting around waiting for a highly publicized television tragedy to force basic available innovation?
It is a totally valid frustration. But if we connect this to the bigger picture and look at the historical timeline of Bering Sea safety regulations, it is a dark truth that maritime laws are almost exclusively written in blood.
Written in blood, that's grim.
It is. Back in the 1980s and early 1990s, the crab fleet was notoriously, staggeringly deadly. Entire boats were vanishing constantly.
Why were boats just vanishing?
Because the captains were overloading the decks with heavy steel crab pots to maximize their catch, making the vessels wildly top-heavy.
So the same issue with the ice we talked about, but with steel.
Exactly. A single rogue wave would flip a massive ship in seconds, killing everyone aboard. The Coast Guard eventually intervened and pushed through the Fishing Vessel Safety Act in the late 1990s.
And that act fundamentally changed the industry, right?
It did. It mandated incredibly strict stability tests for the vessels, and it required the boats to carry immersion suits, often called Gumby suits, and life rafts for every man aboard.
So it vastly improved the survival rates for catastrophic vessel sinkings. But a catastrophic vessel sinking where the crew has a few minutes of warning to abandon ship is fundamentally different than a single deckhand slipping on the ice and falling overboard midship.
Precisely. The regulations solved the macro problem, but left the micro problem largely unaddressed.
And why is that micro problem so hard to fix?
This is where you run into the intense practical push and pull on the deck itself between the fishermen and the regulators. There is a constant raging debate between the desire for personal safety gear and the absolute unforgiving necessity for physical agility.
Because safety gear can actually become the hazard.
Yes.
I've read arguments from veteran crabbers in our sources pushing back against the idea of mandatory safety tethers. A layman might ask, why don't they just clip themselves to the boat like a rock climber?
It seems logical until you understand the deck.
Right, so why don't they?
Because if you mandate tethers that restrict a deckhand's movement by even a fraction of a second, you might prevent him from falling overboard, but you drastically increase the risk that he cannot dive out of the way of an 800-pound steel pot swinging wildly on a hydraulic crane.
Oh, God.
A loose tether line can easily snag on a moving block or a running rope, instantly dragging a man into a hydraulic winch and crushing him.
That is horrific to picture.
The crew will argue that their agility is their primary safety mechanism.
It's a terrifying trade-off. But the technology for these new integrated low-profile PFDs has advanced to the point where they don't significantly restrict movement.
They really have.
The agility argument is rapidly losing its weight against the reality of cold shock browning. And frankly, looking at the legal landscape we just discussed, the threat of millions of dollars in unseaworthiness payouts under the Jones Act might be the actual catalyst that forces fleet owners to adapt.
Money talks.
Morality and common sense push for safety, but massive financial liability is usually what mandates it.
And it's not just physical safety equipment being debated in the wake of Todd Meadows' death. There's a growing, fierce push for what labor advocates are calling blackout agreements regarding the embedded film crews.
This goes right back to Angela Meadows' fight. What exactly would a blackout agreement entail?
A blackout agreement would be a legally binding clause inserted into the contracts between the vessel owners, the crew, and the production companies.
Okay.
It would stipulate that in the event of a catastrophic injury or death on camera, the surviving family of the deceased, not the network, and not the captain, would hold the ultimate unilateral right to veto the broadcast of that footage.
It would formally transfer the power of consent from the media conglomerate to the grieving family.
Exactly, ensuring that their loved one's final moments cannot be monetized without their explicit blessing.
It is forcing a total renegotiation of the boundaries between the workers, the employers who hire them, and the media companies that profit handsomely from documenting their labor.
It recognizes that while the ocean is wild and unregulated, the way we consume the suffering that happens upon it doesn't have to be.
It really is a profound shift.
It is.
Today, we've taken a deep dive into an incredibly sad but deeply revealing event. We started by breaking down those harrowing, frantic 10 minutes in the freezing waters 170 miles north of Dutch Harbor.
We unpacked the terrifying biological mechanisms of the cold shock response and cold incapacitation.
Completely dismantling the Hollywood myths of what it actually means to freeze to death.
We examined the complex ethical dilemmas created by reality television, wrestling with the tension between observing a tragedy for documentary purposes and exploiting it for entertainment.
And we looked closely at the incredible resilience and the stark financial vulnerability of the crabbing community that is inevitably left behind to mourn and support the families of the fallen.
And finally, we explored the massive legal and technological shifts, from century-old Jones Act lawsuits to modern hydrostatic PFDs and blackout agreements that might finally force this unyielding, brutal environment to become just a fraction safer for the next generation of fishermen.
So the next time you are sitting in your living room and you flip on a reality show and you see those massive waves crashing over the bow and you hear the dramatic music swell, I want you to remember that barrier of glass.
Right.
Remember that behind that high-definition screen are real people, breathing real, freezing air. People like Todd Meadows, a 25-year-old father of 3, who are facing very real, entirely unscripted stakes.
The danger is very real.
The entertainment you are consuming is carefully manufactured, but the danger they are in is absolute.
And this tragedy leaves us with a critical, expansive question, one that extends far beyond the icy deck of a Bering Sea crab boat.
What's that?
We talked extensively about the push for blackout agreements. But as technology rapidly evolves, cameras are becoming smaller, cheaper, and increasingly ubiquitous in almost every single sector of our lives.
That's true.
From body cams on delivery drivers, to security feeds in warehouses, to the phones in everyone's pockets.
So true.
Who actually owns the rights to the footage of our worst, most vulnerable moments? Is it the employer who owns the facility and the camera?
Or is it the media company producing the content?
Or is it the families left behind, who have to live with the devastating aftermath long after the viewing public has changed the channel? As the line between occupational hazard and content creation continues to blur in our heavily surveilled society, it's a question we are all going to have to confront and answer.
A heavy but absolutely necessary question to leave you with. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us today. Keep asking questions, stay curious, and most importantly, stay safe.